Hey there, just a quick note. This video is for informational and entertainment purposes only. It's not financial advice. I'm simply sharing my personal experience and opinions. Hey, this is Michael from Brainy Face Project. If you're new to the channel, welcome. If not, welcome back. It's good to see you again. So I actually sold, it's gone. I sold all of my Adobe stock. So it's not like I had millions of dollars worth of Adobe stock, but I had a significant amount of Adobe stock. I mean, it was several thousands of dollars in my portfolio, and I was always very proud of having Adobe stock, but I don't have it anymore, and I'm actually thinking about moving away from the Adobe Creative Cloud. And I just wanted to kind of talk about why I made this change. And I guess I'll start out just by talking about where I started with Adobe. It was back in 1997, and I got a job working for a company that did large format digital images. So they had these posters that they would create that were huge for trade shows and stuff like that. They would actually do buses. If you've ever seen buses that have like the vinyl wrap where they've got all the designs around it, we did that. We did all sorts of stuff, vinyl signs. We did all sorts of electrostatic images, inkjet images, and I got a job with that company. And I had been, really good at computers because I started out working on computers since I was like 12 years old. And so I knew a lot about it, but I didn't know a lot about graphic design. But I knew enough about Macs and computers and networking to get me hired into the company. But then right out of the gate, I had to, like, one of the first jobs I had was retouching a photograph, and I didn't know what to do. The next thing I had to do is design like a poster for a company, and I didn't know what to do. And then I had to do, like, for this outdoor festival, I literally had to design and do hundreds and hundreds of signs. And at that point, I'd figured out what to do because I went out and I bought Photoshop. This is back with Photoshop version 4, which was released, I think, in 1996, and then they did an update in 1997. But I remember it's Photoshop 4, and I was getting into all of the red, green, blue channels and then logos in Adobe Illustrator. Like, I didn't know how to use Bezier curves and how to draw. It was like totally counterintuitive to me, but I figured that out by going out, and it was a good chunk of money at the time. But my wife and I talked about it, and it's like, I'm going to invest in these programs myself because when I'm at work, I want to feel like I know how to use them. So we bought Photoshop, we bought Illustrator, and I practiced like all the time. I just practiced in those programs, and I got really good at them. In fact, once I left that company, I ended up teaching. I did a lot of certification classes. So I taught like security classes and MCSE classes, but the classes that I always loved the most were Photoshop classes. And I would teach Adobe Photoshop all the way up to the advanced classes. And I had some real pros in there who'd been using the software forever. And I got to work with them. And I remember in one of the classes, this was a beginner level class, and I had a bunch of teachers that had come in to learn Adobe Photoshop. And it was just a really fun class. And I had this lady who came up to me after, it was like a 2-day class. And at the end of the second day, she came up and said, "Michael, you are so passionate about Photoshop. I absolutely need to tell you this." She said, "My son, or not son, but my nephew is Thomas Knoll. And if you've used Photoshop for a long time, that name definitely probably means something to you. But Thomas Knoll and his brother basically created Photoshop." And this was, gosh, I think in the late 80s. And then into the 90s, that's when Adobe actually had the software licensed and started, to actually offer it to paying customers. But that was really cool. And that was like one of the coolest moments I ever had in teaching, or just generally any job, because it was like all of us were in that class because of Thomas Knoll. And I love Photoshop. It's just the coolest program. And I used to joke about Photoshop, like, oh, you can't remove that car from that photo. It's not like there's a magic button in Photoshop where you can just click and have it disappear. Well, now there kind of is, with generative AI, you can do a lot of those things, and the software has changed a lot over the years. But what happened last year is, I think this was around the June timeframe, is I caught these stories about the FTC suing Adobe because there were people, including teachers and students and other individuals, that were going out to cancel their Adobe subscriptions, and it was really hard to do it. Adobe had buried the ability to basically unsubscribe or cancel a subscription. They made it so hard to do it, and so the FTC was actually suing Adobe, and that's when it got on my radar. And I thought, you know what, back in, this was 2013, Adobe went to the subscription model only because I used to buy it. I think Photoshop version 6, I want to say it was like Adobe Photoshop CS6, or whatever that version was. I bought that software, and then after that, you couldn't do it anymore. So I've been subscribing to Adobe Creative Cloud for the past, how many years is that? 12 or 13 years. And I actually ran the numbers. I'll put the graphic up on the screen, but I think it was like $7,406, which blew my mind when I thought about the fact, like, I've been paying like $50 a month, then it went up to $54.99, and now it's $59.99 to have the all applications version of the Adobe Creative Cloud. And you can subscribe to only different versions of the software. If you just want to do Photoshop as an example, you can do that, but they recently raised the prices on Adobe Photoshop as well. So they kicked the price up a few extra dollars. And I started to think about that. For the past 12 years, I've spent over $7,000. Just think if I had applied that to my mortgage or, like car payments or something like that, I'd actually have something to show for it. Even if I got like a new big screen TV, I'd have something to show for it. But the only thing that I have is looking back on the fact that they gave me the right to use their software, and I don't own anything. And if I stop paying that subscription fee, I can't use any of those programs anymore. I go to fire it up on my computer, and it's going to be like, nope, you have to validate that you are licensed to use this software, which means you have to pay them. And that bugs me. So I've actually gone through the process of looking at different software packages, and I've got Affinity Photo, and they've got a couple other applications as well. I bought all three of them, and the reason that I bought them is because it was a one-time fee. I basically paid for the software, and that was it. Like, I own that software for the rest of my life. And I know you think, well, I want access to the newest features of the software, and that's cool. But when it comes to Adobe, like, I got to the point, I'd consider myself, at least I was at one point, an expert, because I did this professionally at an ad agency. And then I went on to manage the interactive services department at the ad agency. And we did multimedia CD-ROMs, we designed websites, we did catalogs, we did all sorts of stuff. And I learned the heck out of Adobe Photoshop. I took classes, I worked on it, I studied tutorials, and at my core, I'm a teacher. And so, like, I used Photoshop for a long time, and I've been thinking about this channel because I just kicked this channel back into high gear in the past month. And this channel's been around for like a dozen years or so, but I've been off after the ad agency. I got into like heavy IT and cybersecurity. And I led information technology and cybersecurity full time at some big companies. And so I didn't have time to like mess around in Photoshop, but I did as much as I could. And that's why I've been paying for it over the years. And then my wife is a photographer, and we had our own business, a side business. And so we needed the tools. I was kind of like her IT support. So she was the photographer. She's an excellent photographer, way better than me. But I would go in and teach her how to do things like high dynamic range, or how to adjust color channels with RGB, or how to do masking. And I'm a big nerd when it comes to design stuff, and I love it. And so I've loved having Photoshop in my arsenal. But I don't own it. And if I end up deciding that I don't want to pay for it and the price keeps ticking up, I'm just thinking that over the next 12 years, I'm probably going to spend another $7,000 or $8,000. And if I use Photoshop for the rest of my life, that could easily get into $20,000, $30,000. And heck, if I live to be able to, into my 70s or 80s, I might need that money more than just looking back on having spent it all on the Adobe suite. So I'm thinking now with the channel that I want to be focused, and photography is huge for me. I love AI stuff. I'm always going to keep an eye on emerging AI trends, technologies. I'm interested in the ethics behind all of this stuff. But what I've really been thinking about is by the end of this year, by the end of 2025, I want to get the heck off of Adobe Creative Cloud because I don't like their business practices anymore. I don't like the ethics of it. Their CEO basically said within the past few months, I remember reading an article, I'll try to pull it up here in the video, I'll edit it in, but said something about how people need to keep up with AI and their old software packages. You don't use AI in the software, but people need to use the newest version of the software. And I'm like, but what happens then? Like, I have to pay for it. So if I want to use those features, I have to pay for it. And in my opinion, this is just my opinion, I'm not impressed by the generative capabilities of Photoshop, Firefly, Adobe Illustrator. I always find myself going to Midjourney or Runway or even ChatGPT with 4.0. This is pretty new now, but they have some pretty cool capabilities. And I mess around with a lot of open source stuff as well. And it's really cool to go in and use those software packages. So what I've been thinking is, with this channel, as I transition away from Adobe Creative Cloud, if the community, if you are interested in learning how to do this, to make switch over from, let's say, Adobe Premiere, and you want to go over to DaVinci, like I've done that. I'm all in, man. I switched to DaVinci and it's been a learning curve. And there's a lot of great YouTube channels, but if you want to see how I did it, I want to do videos. If you want to switch to Affinity Photo instead of Photoshop, I can show you how to do that as well. If you're interested, let me know because I really do love teaching and I thought this would be a great focus for the channel. So I can focus on photography, AI trends. We'll still do the fun voice stuff. So we can do like AI conversations because I think the voice stuff is really cool and how we interact with our computers. It's important that we understand that because mark my words, it's getting to the point you'll just ask your computer to edit a photo for you. You won't even need to type it. This is coming in the next year or two. So I want to keep up with those trends and technologies and share them on the channel as well. But if you're interested, I'd really like to know that. Okay, the other thing that I want to talk about here is the whole issue around copyright. There are in general some things that we got wrong, I believe very strongly when it comes to artificial intelligence. We should not have given it access to social media. The cat's out of the bag on that one, right? Because TikTok, Meta, etc. We should not have given it the ability to program, and we should not have given it access to the internet. And we did all those things without stopping and pausing and thinking like, what control should we have in place? And so now this technology is running rampant and we're starting to head towards this agentic kind of AI where it can go out and do things for you. It can do deep research. It can do all sorts of this stuff. And I think with copyright, this is one of the biggest issues. I just did a video on ChatGPT 4.0 and how cool it is to be able to like give it commands and just type things in and have it generate images. But the problem that I have with a lot of that is we have taken the collective knowledge of humans for going back to whenever, and all of that information has been plugged into large language models, and then we have the collective works of all of these different artists, and we just fed it the images. And we're doing the same thing with movies, and we're doing the same thing with music. And while it's cool and it's fun to play around with it, if I stop and I pause and I think about these music services like Udio and some of these other services that we have for video, and especially things like, I love Midjourney. I think it's fantastic. And you've got Pika, you've got all of these different platforms. They had to get the images from somewhere. And while Adobe has tried to do things ethically, they had this program where you could actually contribute to their stock photography, which, by the way, that's not even included for $60 a month. So it's a lot of money, and you don't have access to all the stock photography, unlike Canva, where if you pay the $300 a year for Canva, you actually have access to all sorts of cool clips and stuff like that. But the thing about it with Adobe is they tried to do it ethically, and you have access to all of these pictures, but the way that they train the model just hasn't been that good. I'm not impressed by the quality, but now they've got this new content kind of control. It's C2PA, and I think it's called content credentialing, where it's kind of like a watermark, and they're basically trying to lead us, and by they, it's Adobe and some other companies as well. They're trying to lead us towards the sanctioned use of images, so that there's kind of a stamp which lets people know that this is an authentic image. And on the surface, it sounds like a pretty good idea, but the reason I take issue with this is, who's the gatekeeper? Who actually has control over it? So on the one side, you have the fact that a lot of these organizations are starting to consume content. Dude, the genie's out of the bottle. They've already done that. All of the collective artwork for most artists was already consumed into these large language models, these generative models, where they're able to go in, like ChatGPT 4.0 can do that natively now, generate the images. While they're incredible, they stole a bunch of stuff. They basically did. And I know for a fact that not all of the artists gave their approval for that to happen. But on the flip side with Adobe, like, do you have to pay? There's a simple question. Do you have to pay $60 a month to generate an image through Adobe to validate the fact that it's approved with their stamp of approval? That's where I have an issue, because if I stop paying that fee, then I lose the ability to do that. And I believe in open source. I believe that a lot of this stuff should be able to be freely available. And plus, on the other side, I've been in cyber for a really long time. You can strip that stuff away, right? Once you start to implement controls, it doesn't take that long before somebody figures out how to reverse engineer it. Ethically or not, it happens. And so the ability to validate content, whether it be video, audio, that's a real issue, and it's going to become more of an issue because the quality just keeps getting better and better. I just wanted to mention here some of the software that I'm using. I'm using Affinity Photo and Designer. I'm also using DaVinci Resolve. I was so lost when I started with DaVinci because I've used Adobe Premiere and also Vegas. I've used Vegas since way back when it was owned by Sonic Foundry. Then it went to Sony. Then it went to Magix. I've loved the original Sony Vegas, but over the years, I can't put up with the crashes of Adobe Premiere and Vegas. So I switched over to DaVinci, and now I love it. It was really painful for about 2 months. It was really hard to switch, but I love it now. And then Canva. Oh, and here's the last thing I wanted to say about Canva. I knew there was one more thing, is Adobe has raised, like, they're charging students and teachers to use the Adobe products, and those prices will probably continue to go up, but they changed their policies, so they're charging them. Canva, as a company, a multi-billion-dollar company, they have their Canva for education, and it's free. How cool is that? They don't charge teachers, they don't charge students, and they get all of the premium features. And I don't get any benefit out of that. I pay the $300 a year. If I said a month, it's $300 a year, to be clear, for Canva, and you get an awful lot. It's super easy to use. I love Canva. It's really good. Does it give you the same surgical precision over going into images and manipulating them? No, but did you know that Canva also owns Affinity? So if you look at Affinity Photo, which is a great alternative, which is it's not free, but it's a really great alternative. They own that company as well. And then you got stuff like GIMP, which is open source. You've got a bunch of other open source applications. Way too long to get into that. I'd be happy to kind of lift up the hood and talk about some of the things that I use for image editing, for masking and stuff like that. There's a lot of really cool software. But yeah, anyway, I sold my Adobe stock. If you're interested in seeing some of these tutorial videos on how to make the switch over, again, by the end of 2025, what I want to do is come December, cancel, where I'm not paying Adobe anymore. And that's kind of scary because I've been using it for 25 years and it's going to hurt a little bit. I'm going to miss it. I've had this love relationship with Adobe for such a long time. I will miss it. But if you want to take that journey with me, please be sure to like and subscribe. And then in the comments, I'm super interested. I will read every single comment here and try to reply to all of them. Are you thinking about switching from Adobe Creative Cloud to something else? And are there pain points that you have with the ethics behind the company, some of the things they've done? I'd love to see your comments as well. So thanks for watching. Take care. See you soon.